November 1943. Over the Ruhr Valley, a B-17 Flying Fortress breaks formation. Its left wing is on fire. The crew bails out in ragged sequence, parachutes blooming white against the gray German sky. The bomber continues for another 30 seconds, a ghost ship, then rolls inverted and begins the long spiral toward the Earth. The other B-17s tighten their formation and press on. There is no ceremony. There is no radio call. The war moves forward, and the mathematics of attrition do not pause for grief. This is the European theater in the autumn of 1943. The 8th Air Force has committed itself to daylight precision bombing, a doctrine built on American confidence and the belief that massed formations of heavy bombers can fight their way to any target and back. The theory is sound. The execution is a slaughter. German Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighters tear into the bomber streams with coordinated violence. They attack from the front, diving from altitude at closing speeds exceeding 400 mph. The head-on pass gives bomber gunners less than 3 seconds to track, lead, and fire before the enemy flashes through the formation. Most B-17s go down without landing a single hit. The smell inside a B-17 at 20,000 feet is engine exhaust and hydraulic fluid. The temperature is 40 degrees below zero. Ice forms on the oxygen masks. The metal frame groans under stress. Visibility is limited by frost on the windows and the long nose blocking forward view. Pilots fly by instruments and instinct, trusting their wingmen, scanning the sky for the glint of sunlight on German canopies that signals the next attack. Tactical doctrine is clear. Maintain speed, stay in formation, rely on overlapping fields of fire from defensive guns. Do not break away, do not slow down. The rules are written in blood, refined over 2 years of combat operations. They work when pilots follow them. When they deviate, they die. But doctrine assumes the enemy will behave predictably. It assumes German fighters will respect the danger of massed defensive fire. By late 1943, the Luftwaffe has learned to exploit the gaps. They attack in waves, coordinated and relentless, targeting the lead aircraft and the stragglers with surgical precision. The math is brutal. On some missions, loss rates exceed 15%. Entire squadrons evaporate over the industrial cities of the Ruhr or the rail yards at Schweinfurt. Crews fly their tours in a state of fatalistic endurance, counting missions like prison days, knowing the odds are stacked against survival. Replacements arrive weekly, fresh-faced and undertrained. Some last 5 sorties, some last 1. Ground crews work through the night, patching bullet holes, replacing shattered turrets, scrubbing blood from seats. They do not speak of what they clean. Into this grinder steps a pilot who does not look like a warrior. He is tall and thin, with wire-rimmed glasses that fog in the cockpit humidity. His name is Jay Zeamer, Jr. His crewmates call him the bookworm, and he has been thinking about a problem that no one else believes can be solved. Jay Zeamer, Jr. was born in 1918 in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. His father was a career military officer. His mother played piano and read poetry. The house smelled of pipe tobacco and old books. Dinner conversation revolved around logic puzzles and engineering problems. Jay learned early that precision mattered more than volume. He attended Mias High School in Maine, not popular, not bullied, simply invisible. He joined the debate team and the science club. He built model airplanes with obsessive attention to scale and weight distribution. Teachers described him as meticulous. Classmates described him as odd. He entered MIT in 1936, studied civil engineering, spent weekends at the library instead of football games, graduated in 1940 with decent grades and no clear direction. The world was tilting toward war, but Zeamer was too tall for standard cockpit dimensions and too quiet for command consideration. He enlisted anyway. Passed flight training, not at the top of his class, not at the bottom. Instructors noted his technical aptitude, but questioned his aggression. One evaluation called him hesitant under simulated combat stress. Another flagged him for overanalysis. He was assigned to bomber duty, then shuffled again. Some pilots wore their reassignments like scars. Zeamer treated each one like a research opportunity. He studied how different squadrons operated. He noted what worked and what got people killed. He kept a notebook filled with diagrams, attack angles, energy calculations. His crewmates noticed something strange. Zeamer never panicked. Even when an engine caught fire over the North Sea, even when flak tore a hole in the fuselage the size of a dinner plate, he would narrate the problem aloud clinically, like a surgeon calling out instruments. Oil pressure dropping, altitude loss at 200 feet per minute, trim compensating. It unnerved some men. It reassured others. There was no hysteria in his voice, just data. Zeamer also noticed things, small things, like how German fighters always attacked from the same angles, like how anti-aircraft fire followed predictable patterns based on altitude and speed, like how enemy pilots hesitated when a bomber behaved unpredictably. He began testing small variations, flying slightly slower on approach, altering attack runs by 30 seconds, changing altitude in increments that broke the gunner's rhythm. Nothing dramatic, nothing that violated orders, just marginal adjustments. And his crew started coming home. The statistics were subtle but real. Zeamer's missions had a lower casualty rate, fewer hits, cleaner exits. Other pilots dismissed it as luck. Zeamer dismissed it as probability. He did not boast. He kept refining. By mid-1943, Zeamer had flown more than 40 missions. He was still a captain, still overlooked, still the bookworm. But his crew was loyal in a way that transcended rank. They knew he would not waste them. He would not showboat. He would calculate their survival and execute it. That loyalty would be tested on the morning they climbed into a battered B-17 and pointed it toward Germany. The problem facing the 8th Air Force in 1943 was not just tactical, it was mathematical. American bombers were being shot down faster than they could be replaced. German fighters, particularly the Messerschmitt Bf-109, dominated close-range engagements. The 109 was lighter, faster in turns, and flown by pilots with years of combat experience. American doctrine relied on speed and altitude. Fly high, drop bombs, fly home. Simple, except it was not working. Me-109s climbed faster than expected. They coordinated attacks with brutal efficiency. They exploited blind spots. American gunners could not track them. Fighter escorts were stretched thin across thousands of miles of airspace. Bomber crews were on their own. Intelligence officers studied after-action reports and found a grim pattern. When bombers encountered enemy fighters, survival depended on two things: luck and firepower. Maneuvering rarely helped. Bombers were too heavy, too slow. Dogfighting was suicide. So the doctrine became maintain speed, stay in formation, rely on defensive guns, do not deviate. But men kept dying. Commanders tried everything. They added more guns. They altered flight paths. They scheduled missions at different times. Nothing changed the fundamental equation. A Me-109 could outmaneuver a bomber. Period. Some pilots tried wild, evasive tactics, diving, banking hard, spiraling. Most crashed or stalled out. A few survived and were grounded for recklessness. The message was clear: do not experiment, follow procedure, accept the losses. Zeamer read the reports differently. He noticed that the worst casualties occurred during the chase. After the bombing run, when crews were heading home, Me-109s would pursue and pick them apart from behind. The bombers would try to outrun them. They could not. The fighters would sit in the tail blind spot and fire until something exploded. Every manual said the same thing: maximize throttle, get distance, pray. Zeamer saw a flaw in that logic. If you cannot outrun them and you cannot outturn them, what is left? He started thinking about energy states. A Me-109 at high speed has momentum. It takes time to slow down, time to adjust. If a bomber suddenly decelerated, the fighter would overshoot. Not by much, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, but in combat, 2 seconds is an eternity. He sketched it out. If you reduced throttle at the exact moment a Me-109 committed to an attack run, the fighter would shoot past. The German pilot would have to pull up, bleed speed, reposition. During that window, your gunners would have a clear shot. It was textbook physics. It was also insane. Slowing down in combat violated every instinct. Pilots are trained to equate speed with survival. Throttling down while under attack felt like surrender. Worse, it required perfect timing. Too-keyed. Early, and the Me-109 adjusts. Too late, and you take fire. The margin for error was non-existent. Zeamer pitched the idea to his squadron commander. The response was blunt, dismissed. Slowing down would make them an easier target. It would destabilize the aircraft. It would cause a stall. The idea was filed under dangerous nonsense. Zeamer did not argue. He simply stopped talking about it. But he did not stop thinking. June 16, 1943. Dawn comes slow over RAF Molesworth. The English countryside hums with morning mist. Ground crews move in silence, checking fuel lines and patching bullet holes with aluminum tape. Zeamer's B-17 sits at the end of the runway, older and heavier than the rest. It has been written off twice. It should not still be flying. The mission brief is short. Fly deep into Germany, photograph industrial targets near Schweinfurt, return. Expected enemy contact high. Expected survival rate not discussed. The briefing room smells of coffee and cigarette smoke. Maps. Cover the walls, red lines tracing routes over hostile territory. Intelligence officers point to flak concentrations, known fighter bases, emergency landing fields. The crews listen with the hollow attention of men who have heard it all before. Some write letters before the mission. Others check their guns in silence. A few pray. Zeamer walks the perimeter of his plane. He checks the gun mounts personally. He reviews fuel calculations with his navigator. He briefs the crew in his usual monotone. 17 minutes over target. If we take fire, we head west toward the coast. If we lose an engine, we glide to this coordinate. No one asks what happens if they lose 2 engines. They take off at over 400 hours. The sky is still dark. Zeamer flies low to avoid early radar detection. The English Channel below is black and featureless. Radio silence. No fighter escort, just the drone of Wright Cyclone engines and the faint smell of hydraulic fluid. Bayou 600, they cross into German airspace. Anti-aircraft. Fire begins immediately, black puffs blooming at their altitude. Zeamer maintains course, steady and deliberate. The flak is heavy, but predictable. He adjusts altitude by 500 feet, watches the next barrage explode where they used to be. By 0700, they reach the target area. The sun rises over Schweinfurt. Zeamer climbs to photo altitude, 22,000 feet. The bombardier begins snapping images. German industrial installations spread below like a blueprint. Factories, rail yards, power stations. Then the first Me-109 appears. It rises from below, fast and angled. The morning sun glinting off its wings. Then another. Then 4 more. 11 in total. A full hunter group. The radio crackles. Rear gunner reports contact. Zeamer acknowledges. He maintains course. The photo run is not finished. 45 seconds remaining. The Me-109s circle, probing. They do not attack immediately. They are coordinated, disciplined. They wait for the bomber to break formation, to panic, to run. That is when they strike. Zeamer finishes the photo run. He banks west. Full throttle, standard procedure. The Germans close in. The first burst of cannon fire rips through the tail section. Alarms scream. Hydraulic pressure drops. The rear gunner returns fire, but the Me-109 is already gone, looping back for another pass. Zeamer watches the formation through his side window. He counts their spacing. He measures their approach angles. He notes their speed, approximately 380 mph in the dive. They are setting up a rolling attack one after another. Textbook. And textbook means predictable. The second Me-109 dives from above. Zeamer holds course, waits. The fighter closes to 400 yards. 250. His co-pilot's hand hovers near the throttle, knuckles white. The crew braces for impact. Cannon fire walks toward them, stitching the sky. Then Zeamer does what no one expects. He cuts throttle. Both engines. The bomber lurches forward, momentum fighting drag. The airframe shudders. The nose drops slightly. The Me-109 screams past, overshooting by a dozen yards, the German pilot's face visible for a split second, eyes wide with confusion. The top gunner tracks it, firing a sustained burst. Tracers walk across the Me-109's fuselage. Smoke pours from its engine. It spirals down, trailing fire. The other Me-109s hesitate, confused. Bombers do not slow down. They run. This one just stopped running. German radio chatter erupts. Zeamer's radio operator, who speaks conversational German, translates fragments. He's braking. He's slowing down. What is he doing? The flight leader's voice cuts through, sharp and frustrated. Maintain attack speed. Compensate for deceleration. But compensation requires time. Time to process. Time to adjust throttle. Time to recalculate the firing solution. And Zeamer is not giving them time. A third Me-109 commits to a stern attack. Zeamer throttles down again, drops 10 degrees of flap. The bomber's speed bleeds from 180 mph to 140. The fighter overshoots, completely unable to slow its dive fast enough. The waist gunner opens fire, hits the wing root. The Me-109 breaks off, trailing smoke and fuel. Now the enemy is uncertain. Their attacks become erratic. They try different angles. Beam attacks from the side, vertical dives from directly above. Zeamer varies his response. Sometimes he slows. Sometimes he drops altitude. Sometimes he throttles up at the last second, throwing off their timing. It is not dogfighting. It is disruption. The Me-109s burn fuel. They reposition. They overshoot. They take fire from angles they did not anticipate. The German flight leader's voice grows louder on the radio. He is too slow. We are overshooting. Reduce approach speed. But reducing speed means losing the energy advantage. It means becoming vulnerable to the bomber's guns. The tactical problem has no clean solution. One by one, they disengage. By the time Zeamer crosses back into Allied airspace, 4 Me-109s have been driven off. 2 are confirmed damaged, trailing kill. Smoke as they limped toward German bases. The bomber is shot, full of holes. The hydraulics are failing. One engine is stuttering, oil pressure dropping into the red, but the crew is alive. Zeamer lands the plane on one engine and no brakes. It skids off the runway into the mud, plowing a trench 50 yards long before coming to rest at an angle. Silence. Then the hatch opens. The crew climbs out, shaking. Ground crews stare. The plane looks like it flew through a sawmill. Over 500 bullet holes. The tail section is shredded. The cockpit canopy is cracked. Blood streaks the floor from minor wounds. Zeamer is wounded, shrapnel in his shoulder. So is the bombardier. So is the navigator. They refused to abort. They completed the mission. They brought the photographs home. And they survived something that should have killed them. The photographs from Schweinfurt are developed within hours. Intelligence officers spread them across a map table. The images are sharp, clear. They show factory, layouts, fuel storage, troop concentrations, the kind of intelligence that costs lives to obtain. But the real debrief happens in a medical tent. Zeamer lies on a cot, bandaged and pale. A flight surgeon checks his wounds. 2 bullet fragments removed from his shoulder. Shrapnel in his leg. He is lucky to be conscious. A colonel arrives. He wants to know what happened, how a single bomber fought off 11 Me-109s and made it home. Zeamer explains calmly, methodically. He describes the throttle reductions, the timing, the disruption of the enemy's energy state, the physics behind momentum and deceleration. The colonel listens. He does not interrupt. When Zeamer finishes, the tent is silent. Then the colonel asks a single question. "Did you plan this?" Zeamer nods. He has been thinking about it for months. The colonel leaves. He does not say whether Zeamer will be court-martialed or commended. The line between innovation and insubordination is thin. 3 days later, the answer comes. Zeamer is awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. His bombardier receives the same. The rest of the crew receives air medals. The citations are dry and factual. They reference courage under fire, successful completion of a critical reconnaissance mission. They do not mention the throttle trick, not officially. But pilots talk. Word spreads through the squadrons like wildfire. Zeamer's maneuver is analyzed, debated, tested in quiet conversations over mess hall tables and in cockpits during pre-flight checks. Some dismiss it as a fluke, a lucky accident that worked once and will never work again. Others see the logic, the pure physics of it. A few brave pilots try it in combat. It works, not every time. Timing is everything. The margin for error remains razor thin. But when executed correctly, the throttle reduction creates a window, a gap, a chance. Flight instructors begin incorporating it into advanced training, not as doctrine, as an option, a tool. Something to consider when speed alone is not enough. Zeamer does not fly combat missions again. His injuries are too severe, too much damage to his shoulder for the sustained G-forces of combat flight. He is reassigned stateside to a training command. He spends the rest of the war training pilots at Maxwell Field in Alabama, teaching them to think, not just react, to see physics in the chaos of aerial combat. He never boasts. He never claims to have changed anything. He gives lectures on energy management, on reading enemy behavior, on exploiting momentum differentials. His students listen with the attention of men who know their lives depend on the lessons, but the men he trains carry his lesson forward. They survive situations that should have killed them. They come home. They teach others. The throttle trick becomes part of the invisible curriculum, not written in manuals, not codified in official doctrine, but passed down through debriefs and barroom conversations and late-night discussions in ready rooms. A small piece of cunning in a war full of brute force. Some call it the Zeamer maneuver. Most just call it the brake trick. A few call it the physics solution. By the end of 1943, bomber losses over Europe begin to decline. Not dramatically, not everywhere, but the trend is measurable, visible, in the statistical analyses compiled by intelligence officers. They attribute it to better fighter coverage, improved aircraft like the P-51 Mustang with its extended range, more experienced crews who have survived their first missions and learned the hard lessons. Some credit goes to tactics, including one small, strange adjustment in how pilots handle close-quarter fighter attacks. It is never called the Zeamer maneuver in official reports. It is simply known, understood, applied. Captured German pilots, interrogated after the war in POW camps and debriefing centers, mention confusion during certain engagements. American bombers that behaved unpredictably, targets that suddenly slowed or changed. Speed at critical moments. It disrupted attack rhythms, threw off the carefully practiced coordination of fighter groups. It created uncertainty. In aerial combat, uncertainty kills aggression. A pilot who hesitates is a pilot who does not press the attack. And attacks that are not pressed do not result in kills. Zeamer's mission to Schweinfurt yields more than photographs of German industry. It shifts thinking, not policy, not official doctrine written in training manuals, but something subtler, something harder to quantify. It plants a seed, the idea that survival is not just about firepower or speed or altitude. It is about timing, disruption, calculation, about understanding the enemy's assumptions and breaking them at the moment of commitment. Other pilots begin experimenting with variations. throttle adjustments timed to different phases of attack, altitude changes that disrupt firing solutions, evasive patterns that break enemy expectations, and force repositioning. Not all. Experiments work. Some are disastrous, resulting in stalls, collisions, catastrophic loss of control, but enough succeed to prove the principle. You do not have to be faster. You have to be harder to predict. The 5th Air Force logs over 10,000 combat sorties in the European theater during the latter half of 1943. The survival rate improves by 4% over the previous 6 months. 4% sounds small. It represents hundreds of lives, thousands of flight hours. Entire crews that make it home to see another mission, another day, another chance. Zeamer's crew, the misfits and cast-offs who trusted his calculations when no one else would, become legends in their own quiet way. They do not give interviews. They do not write memoirs for the newspapers back home. But other crews know their names, know what they did on that morning over Schweinfurt. The plane they flew, tail number 4230177, continues flying missions until August 1944, when it is finally shot down over Berlin, the replacement. Crew does not survive. No one thinks to preserve the aircraft's history. Its story is recorded only in scattered mission reports and fading logbooks, but the lesson survives. Intelligence analysts dig deeper into German radio transcripts captured by signals units during missions throughout late 1943 and early 1944. The transcripts reveal a pattern. German fighter pilots reporting unexpected bomber behavior, flight leaders issuing frustrated commands. One transcript from October 1943, intercepted during a raid on Bremen, captures the moment perfectly. A Me-109 pilot radios his flight leader during an attack run. "I'm committed, closing to firing range." 2 seconds of silence, then panicked. "Brake, brake, he's slowing down. I can't adjust. We're overshooting." The flight leader's response is clipped, angry. "All aircraft compensate for target deceleration. Reduce approach speed by 50 kilometers per hour." But the adjustment costs them. Slower approach speeds mean longer exposure to defensive fire. It means losing the energy advantage that makes the head-on pass so deadly. It means second-guessing every attack run, wondering if the target will slow again, if the carefully practiced timing will collapse into chaos. Another transcript from December 1943, a mission over Osnabrück, shows the evolution of German awareness. American bombers employing deceleration tactic do not commit to full-speed approach, maintain flexibility. The tactical problem has infected their doctrine. They are adapting. But adaptation means caution. Caution means hesitation. Hesitation means fewer kills. The psychological impact spreads through Luftwaffe fighter groups like a slow poison. By early 1944, German fighter tactics begin to shift. They rely more on vertical attacks from directly above, where bomber deceleration is less effective. They increase the use of rocket attacks from beyond defensive gun range. They coordinate with flak batteries to bracket bombers in kill zones. These adaptations work to a degree, but they require more fuel, more coordination, more time. And time is something the Luftwaffe has less of with each passing month as Allied air superiority grows and German fuel supplies dwindle. The intercepted radio calls become case studies in American intelligence briefings. Officers play the recordings for bomber crews during pre-mission briefings. The sound of German voices, confused and frustrated, becomes a small psychological weapon, proof that the enemy is not invincible. Proof that unconventional thinking can create tactical advantages even when flying inferior aircraft in desperate situations. Proof that physics, properly understood and ruthlessly applied, does not care about doctrine or tradition or rank. The photographs Zeamer brought back from Schweinfurt prove invaluable. They reveal structural weaknesses in German ball-bearing production facilities, vulnerabilities that subsequent bombing raids exploit with devastating effectiveness. But The intelligence community values something else more. The combat report describing the throttle reduction tactic. Copies circulate through 8th Air Force headquarters, then to the Pentagon, then to training commands across the United States. Analysts study it with the same intensity they study German radar frequencies and fighter production numbers. A formal test program is initiated at Eglin Field in Florida. Experienced bomber pilots volunteer to act as defenders, while fighter pilots simulate German attack profiles. Engineers measure turning radius, G-loads, speed loss, recovery time. They confirm what Zeamer intuited through observation and calculation. At specific speeds, a B-17 can create a deceleration window that forces an attacking fighter to overshoot. The cost is speed and altitude, but the gain is survival. The physics are undeniable. Doctrine is quietly updated. No official announcement, no public reversal of previous policy, but the training syllabus is modified. New. Pilots arriving in England in early 1944 receive instruction on defensive deceleration as a last resort tactic. Instructors emphasize timing and aircraft control. The maneuver is paired with situational awareness training, ensuring pilots know when to use it and when standard evasive procedures are more appropriate. It is not a replacement for sound tactics. It is an additional tool, a final option when all others have failed. Flight training films are produced. They show bomber formations under attack, the moment of enemy commitment, the throttle reduction, the overshoot. The narration is clinical, matter of fact. When the attacking fighter reaches 300 yards and has committed to his firing pass, a rapid reduction in throttle can disrupt his firing solution. Timing is critical. Premature deceleration allows the enemy to adjust. Delayed deceleration results in enemy fire on target. The films are shown in briefing rooms across England, Italy, and the Pacific. Thousands of pilots watch. Hundreds try it in combat. Many survive situations that would have killed them months earlier. Zeamer, teaching at Maxwell Field, receives letters from pilots he has never met. They thank him for the lesson that saved their lives, for the equation that gave them a chance. Some describe their missions in detail, the moment they throttled down, the German fighter flashing past, the burst from their gunner, finding its mark. Zeamer reads each letter carefully, files them in a folder, never responds. He does not know what to say. He solved a problem. Others applied the solution. The mathematics worked. What more is there to discuss? By summer 1944, Allied air superiority over Europe is firmly established. P-51 Mustangs escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. German fighter losses mount faster than replacements can be trained. The Luftwaffe's defensive capability crumbles under the weight of attrition, fuel shortages, and the relentless pressure of round-the-clock bombing. The throttle trick becomes less necessary as fighter escorts dominate the skies. But the principle remains embedded in training, a permanent part of the tactical toolkit for bomber crews facing overwhelming odds. The maneuver saves lives not through frequency of use, but through its existence as an option, a psychological reassurance that even in the worst moments, when enemy fighters close in and escape seems impossible, there is still one more card to play. That knowledge changes how crews approach missions. They fly with more confidence, more aggression, more willingness to press into heavily defended targets, knowing they have tools beyond prayer and luck. Jay Zeamer returns to civilian life in 1945. He settles in New England, far from the bases and briefing rooms and the smell of hydraulic fluid. He works as an engineer, designing bridges and water treatment systems, solving problems with the same methodical precision he brought to aerial combat. He marries a school teacher he met at a church social. They raise 3 children in a modest house with a workshop in the basement where he builds model airplanes with his sons, teaching them about lift and drag and the fundamental equations that govern flight. He does not talk about the war unless asked, and even then his answers are brief. deflecting attention away from his own actions toward the crews he flew with, the men who trusted his calculations when common sense said to run. He attends a few veteran reunions. He shakes hands. He smiles quietly when old crewmates retell the story of Schweinfurt, adding details with each passing year until the mission becomes myth. He never corrects them, never adds his own perspective. He lets the legend grow on its own, separate from the mathematical reality he experienced in the cockpit. He dies in 2007 at the age of 88. His obituary in the local newspaper mentions his service in the 8th Air Force, the Distinguished Flying Cross, his career as a civil engineer. It does not mention the throttle trick. Most people who read it do not know what he really contributed, the small equation that rippled through squadrons and changed how bomber crews thought about survival. His children donate his papers to a military archive. Among them are notebooks filled with diagrams, attack angles sketched from memory, calculations of closure rates, and deceleration windows. Researchers discover them years later, adding them to the historical record of tactical innovation. In flight schools, decades after the war, instructors still teach energy management. They still talk about unpredictability as a defensive tool. They still drill pilots on the importance of timing over raw speed, on understanding enemy assumptions and exploiting them at the moment of commitment. The language has changed. The aircraft have changed. Jets replaced propellers, missiles replaced guns, radar replaced visual scanning. But the principle has not changed. Physics does not care about technology or era or doctrine. Momentum is momentum. Deceleration creates gaps. Gaps create opportunities. Modern fighter doctrine includes defensive maneuvers descended directly from Zeamer's insight, adapted and refined through generations of combat experience, but rooted in the same fundamental understanding. That survival sometimes requires doing the opposite of what instinct demands. That intellect is a weapon as potent as any gun. That a quiet man with a notebook can outlast squadrons of experienced pilots simply by thinking more clearly about the problem. Zeamer never sought fame, he sought answers, and in the process he gave his crew and hundreds of others a chance to come home. His name fades from memory, but the idea endures, that the smartest move is not always the fastest. Sometimes it is the one no one expects.